Okay. I'd like to introduce Nathan Ross. Nathan is a therapist and national child welfare consultant who has used his life, educational, and professional experiences to improve the foster care system throughout North America. He entered the foster care system when he was 10 after significant abuse and neglect, as well as insufficient child welfare interventions, resulting in two of his siblings dying. Over the last 10 years, he has worked with young people on crafting their stories and using their personal experiences to impact system changes, which included passing the Foster Children's Bill of Rights in Missouri. He later developed and launched a transition program for young adults aging out of foster care that is staffed by alumni of foster care and uses a no-eject self-determination model of support. He's the founder of Resilience Recognized and continues to use his knowledge to help agencies, organizations, and states identify and develop programs and policies that focus on authentically engaging youth. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I'm looking at all the admits coming up as well, to make sure no one gets left behind. So it's evening here for me, so good evening. I am super excited to be here. I'm also super excited because this is a great way to end my week before going to Mexico. So my wife and I are going on vacation for a week. Our anniversary is next week, so this is like a nice way to round it all out. Yes, thank you. And I know some people aren't able to travel depending on where you are in the world, so I won't harp on that too much. But I'm super excited. I'll get in, share a little bit of my story, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. One of the things I just would like to say to get started is, as you hear things and have questions, really nothing's off limits. I've been sharing my story since I was 18. I'm 32 now, in case people are wondering, because I know for a lot of people I look really young, and 32 is young, but I'm older than I might look. So I've been sharing my story for a very long time, since I first went to college, and so I've been asked pretty much everything. Feel free. I'm pretty open. That's why I do this work. So I'll take you through a condensed version of 32 years, what led me to this spot right here today, and then we'll move from there. Does that sound okay? All right. There are some harder parts in my story, and for today's conversation, I won't get into too much detail. I have a book that will be shared, and you can get more detail there, but I also don't want to trigger or traumatize someone, and I don't know where everyone's backgrounds are, so I'll try to keep it relatively a little easier. So I was born in Kansas City, Missouri. And so that's in the States, depending on where you are in the world. So in the United States, I've lived here my whole life. I have an older sister. I had 3 triplet younger brothers, and we all lived with my birth mom for the entire time before we came into foster care. My brothers have a different dad than my sister and I, so we had separate dads, and they're biracial. But for the most part, we lived in Kansas City with my mom, and our life was pretty much, it was pretty good. We didn't have a lot. We lived in poverty, but as children, we didn't know. We didn't know we were poor. We realized we didn't have a lot of things that other people had, but we had my mom. She had all of us, 5 children, by the time she was 24, I believe. So she was a kid herself. And so that really worked out for us as kids, because we got to have, this young person who had lots of energy, who would chase us around and do all kinds of fun things with us. And it wasn't until I started getting older that I realized that our family wasn't operating maybe the same way that other people's families were operating. And I'll jump back and forth a little bit, because an important piece to know is that I lived with my birth mom for 10 years. And when I got my records of my child welfare experience when I was 21, I found that we had the child welfare system in and out of our lives for pretty much that entire 10 years. We had over 10 different hotline investigations into our family in that time, all of them unsubstantiated. I remember at different points in time having workers come into our home, but I didn't quite understand what that meant in the beginning. we were very much loyal to my mom all the way to the end. And so I didn't quite understand what they were trying to do. And even after I started to figure it out, that loyalty still remained. And so in the beginning, it was a lot more of the neglect side. So I have a single parent who had graduated high school, but no college education, trying to raise 5 children on her own in the inner city. So our life was difficult in terms of how our society is structured. So there were times where we had lights cut off, or we were getting eviction notices and things like that. And so that caused concern for many people, which led to those hotline investigations. But anytime we were asked questions in those beginning years, it was always, no, everything's great. Our mom's great. We did have a discipline structure in our family that you would get spanked. And, spankings could come from anyone that was older than you, pretty much. And that was just our community. We knew that if you disrespected your elders or did something that was inappropriate, you would get a spanking. And that could be with a hand, a switch, a belt, all things that now we all would be on the hotline, calling and saying, oh, this kid is in trouble. But that was just the community that we lived in, and everyone understood that. And so when we would get asked questions about abuse, it never registered to us as being anything off or odd. It just was part of our lives. But as I got older, about 5 or 6 years old, I started to recognize that something in my birth mom was shifting. And so she had a lot of early trauma and went back and forth between living with her parents and living in other states, and had a lot of things that she endured. And that trauma, on top of dealing with 5 children, on top of trying to figure out being in her 20s and making her way in life, created a lot of mental health for her. And so what started out to be normal punishments in our family started to see more and more frequent and more severe. And they also seemed to get more intense whenever my mother was trying to establish a romantic relationship with someone else. And so it's almost as if she could not balance how to be a mom to her 5 children, how to have a full-time job, and how to maintain a romantic relationship with someone, because going into a relationship saying you have 5 children under the age of 7 does not make you the most ideal partner to some people. So that was a struggle for her. And in the beginning, it was fine, but we then got to a place where it was more of a, we shouldn't be seen, we shouldn't be heard. And then we started to be blamed, not only verbally, but physically, if a relationship didn't work out. But through all of that, this was still our mom. This was still the person who, before all of this stuff was happening, played with us, laughed with us, took care of us when we were sick, fed us, made sure that we got to this point in our lives. So there was still that deep loyalty. And for me, especially, I could not figure out why this was happening, other than there must be something that we're doing. So we get to, I'm now 7 years old, and it's intensifying even more. We've gone from more frequent physical beatings to also having starvation. And, I've reflected on a lot of my early life, a lot, since it's become part of my career. And one of the things that I do believe happened, truthfully, is that my mother could not provide for us. I think that she ran out of food stamps and out of family support. And so we went without a meal or two. But her being prideful and her increasing mental health, she told us that it was because we had misbehaved. And so missing 1 meal turned into missing 2, which turned into a day, which turned into a week, which would then turn into 2 weeks. And when we would go those 2 weeks without food, we would sometimes receive bread or water to make sure that we were sustained, but that was it. And when that was happening, we were also prevented from going to school. My mother became so obsessed with the control piece of her family that she wanted to make sure that no one outside of our family would intervene. So if we were told we weren't going to eat, we weren't able to eat. And what that led to was our bodies going to a place where we started rejecting food. So we would go those 2 weeks on very, very few calories and water, and we would be given food from her, and we would throw it up. And then she would see that as disrespect to her. And so our punishment would continue again. And again, throughout this time, we're having child welfare workers come in and out of our lives. And so when we weren't on food restriction, we were going back to school, we were going into the community, and people were seeing us. My mom was very good at making sure the clothes covered us, of course, and that we weren't going to school if we still had bruises on us and things like that. But people could tell that we were underweight. People could tell if we looked dirty or if we had clothes that didn't fit. And so we were still getting those calls, and we were still having people come to our house, and we were still having people coming and asking us, is everything going okay? And in our child welfare system, people would come and ask those questions with my mom present, because of course they wanted to make sure that we were okay and not scared, but they were also asking us if we were being abused by the person who was in the room with no guarantee of safety. And I've been asked the question a lot, would you have said anything if she wasn't in the room? And I truly don't know that I would have. There was still such an ingrained loyalty at that point in time that I don't know that I would have said anything, but it still strikes me as very odd and just poor practice to ask questions about abuse with the potential abuser there. So we got really good at covering up those things and talking about how everything in our life was great and how everything in our family was good. And I started to really use that time to play out what I wished our family was, and thinking about the things that we had and wanting that to come back and being disappointed, but also just really hoping that that would happen again. And so at the point that I'm 9 and 10 years old, that is, of course, is the worst times in our time with my birth mom. At some point, she started focusing a lot of her energy on 2 of my triplet brothers. Because they were biracial, whenever they misbehaved, she really believed that a part of that was because they were white. Part of them was white. And she received a lot of backlash in our family, the Black side of our family, because she had biracial children. And so any misbehavior from them was which added insult to her. And she started really focusing her energy on that. My biological sister and I, and one of my triplet brothers, we had a much more survival instinct of going under the radar and not being caught and not trying to upset her and wanting her to be happy. And 2 of my brothers were and their survival instinct was they felt hunger a lot and they would try to seek that nourishment, and then they would get caught. And my mom would consider that stealing food. So at the end of our time with her, she resorted to locking them in our basement for weeks and months at a time, while the rest of us went to school and while she went off to work. And of course, we weren't allowed to tell anyone what was going on. We weren't allowed to talk about it. And she always told us, hey, you can say something, but even if you do, how long is it going to take them to get here? And what could I do in that time? And so for me, as a 9 and 10-year-old child, I'm not only going through the piece of, this is my mom, I love her, she has to be doing this for a reason, but there's also the really scared part of me that's, I want this to stop. I want us to be able to do something different, but who can I tell? I mean, we've had these people come in and out of our homes asking us questions. No one's going to do anything anyway. We've seen that. So we just need to keep moving forward. Hopefully it will one day get better. And of course, it didn't get better. My mother continued to escalate in her own mental health to the point that she eventually threw my brothers in a hot bath that burned them so badly that they died from the burns in our house. In front of all of us, one of my brothers died that night, just there in front of all of us, and our lives completely changed at that time. So we went from being these kids that no one knew about, this family that no one knew about, to being the Bass children and the Bass family and the Bass case, and everyone talked about it, and it got national coverage, and everyone was outraged at my mom and outraged at the system because everyone started hearing about all of the investigations and all the things that were done. And that night we got rushed off to the emergency room, and my surviving brother at the time then died that night, following one of my other brothers. And so we lost 2 of our brothers in the span of 10 hours, and was the last time we were going to see our birth mom. We didn't know that at the time. And then we were thrown into the foster care system, and everyone told us, hey, you're in foster care now. We're here to save you. It's going to be great. Fortunately for us, because our case became so high profile, we actually did have a fantastic foster care experience. We had the same worker, we had the same adoption worker, the same therapist, the same guardian ad litem, the same everything the entire time we were in care. We also stayed together. And so I came in at 10, my sister 12, my brother 8. I don't know where everyone is, but in our child welfare system, each of us individually is considered a hard to place child at that point because of our ages, and permanency is not the easiest thing individually. let alone together. It's very, very common that siblings are going to be split, especially as old as we were. And we were all having reactions to the trauma, that we experienced. I know for myself, especially when I came into care and they were like, oh, you can't be spanked in foster care, they'll get in trouble. That, once I got my bearings, gave me all kinds of latitude to do all kinds of the crazy foster kid stuff that people hear about. And it's like, oh, that sounds like a foster child. I was absolutely a nightmare for our foster parents, who were amazing, and I'm still connected to them now. But they really, really helped, because they really focused on trying to give us the ability to have emotions and express them and be okay with it. And of course, we had natural consequences and stuff. They weren't just letting us run all over them, but it was the first time that we were able to work through those things without having to be fearful of our lives. And so it was a really good experience. And we went into that foster home, and they were 60 years old at the time. They were a white couple, and we were moving from the city to a farm town. And so it was extremely hard in that cultural piece. And I didn't want anyone to know I was in foster care. It's hard to not look like you're in foster care when your parents are two old white people who are bringing you to school every day. And people ask, well, who are they? And there is no family that you can say that would make people be like, oh yeah, that makes sense without question. So of course I had to say, they're my foster parents were in foster care, and I got really good at just saying, well, my mom couldn't take care of us. Well, my mom couldn't take care of us. And kids don't care that much anyway, honestly. So our questions pretty much stopped there. But we really started to work through those things. And it was the first time that I got to have normal childhood experiences, the first time I got to go to birthday parties. And though it was hard, because I also had to leave my siblings behind. And so there was the guilt that I had as the oldest boy in our home, previous to coming into foster care, and feeling like I should have done more and I should have been better, and not doing more and not being better. And so I was working through all of that. And so then I was, we like to use labels in child welfare. And so I was that parentified child, the one who, I got this, foster parents, you back up, you don't actually know anything. I have this, I understand our family dynamics. And so having to learn to just be a kid was extremely hard. And truthfully, even now, all these years later, it's still hard when my siblings and I talk and I think that they're doing something that I don't love, not being like, hey, do something different, even for my older sister. And so like there's just a part of that's always going to be ingrained in that. But we moved along, we started to heal. And though I didn't love the fact that I had two old white parents, I was like, well, they're decent enough grandparents. I could probably get used to this. And if I'm good, we'll stay. And then we were told we were going to move again, and we were going to move to an adoptive placement. And so everything that I had worked towards over the 2.5 years that we had lived with them completely undid, because I had worked so hard in the beginning, put all these walls up, don't allow yourself to be hurt again, make sure you protect your siblings. And then slowly they just started breaking them down because they were so consistent, so trustworthy. And I was just devastated. Now, moving ahead, when I got my records, throughout the 2.5 years that we lived with my foster parents, Jack and Kaylee, we were told multiple times, this is a foster placement and you're going to go to an adoptive placement. And there was a lot of work that was done. We went to adoption fairs, we got adoption pictures taken. And I remember all of those events, but my child mind did not understand that foster care and adoption weren't the same thing. And I just assumed that that meant if we were good enough, we were going to stay here and we wouldn't need to go anywhere else. And so I felt completely betrayed, threw up all those walls again, and was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not ever going to let anyone else in. We're going to move to this adoptive home. It's fine. I was 13 at the time. We'll just move on into adulthood and forget everyone. I don't need family anyway. So we get to our adoptive home, pre-adoptive home at that time, and I completely wanted to run away. We had gone from living with this foster family in Belton, and it was just the three of us, to going into a home where there were 12 other children who actually lived there. And I was like, oh no, this is a madhouse. I can't stay here. Who's in charge? What's going to happen? And our adoptive parents were younger. And so then I was also scared, like, what are these parents like? Are they going to beat us? Are they going to do any of those things? I got used to the ease of being with Jack and Kaylee, our foster parents. So I did not want to stay there, and I tried everything to get moved and talked to my therapist and called my therapist constantly and my caseworker constantly, please move us, please move us. But my adoptive parents were very consistent in that you're going to be here. Like, this is it. This is your family. We're not letting you go. And so we went through that. And at some point, my brother decided he didn't want to stay there, and they actually kept him in our first foster placement, which also then sparked a whole bunch of issues for me of why him and not us. And I thought you said that we had to leave. And so then I felt betrayed by him as well. How could you leave our family? We're supposed to stick together. And so then we stopped talking, and my sister and I stayed in our pre-adoptive home, and eventually we were adopted there. Despite the fact that I told myself I wasn't going to be, and I didn't want to be part of a family, I found myself going through the same steps of when there are people who are consistent and trustworthy and show up every day, letting down that guard enough to say, okay, I could probably do this, and this isn't so bad. And I had siblings and started having, again, additional normal childhood experiences as a teen. So I got adopted, and I completely changed my name. I was named after my birth dad and wanted nothing to do with that. I, of course, didn't want my last name because of how associated it was with everything that had happened and people would find out. So I completely changed my name, and I also didn't want anyone to know anything about what had happened to me. Of course, I was adopted transracially, so parents were white, and so I wasn't going to get past that. But also as a teenager, the great thing about going through teen development is you want to detach from parents, and so I just didn't invite them to anything. That was my thing. You know, I would go to events, and I would just not have your parents, and it was okay because lots of people didn't have their parents. And then they would show up at things, and I would be mortified, and not just the teen mortified, but like the, oh shit, now everyone's going to know that I'm adopted, and I'm adopted by white people. So I struggled with that identity piece a lot as I was in high school. And then I was very fortunate that, again, I stayed connected to my foster parents. So as I graduated high school and was ready for college, they reached out and said that they would help. And so I was able to go off to college. And in college, I really didn't want to tell anyone about anything ever. And there was no need to, because my parents weren't going with me. So I was like, yeah, I can just talk about, if I want to tell people I'm adopted, great. I can talk about my family in a general way, and no one has to know. I majored in theater as a college student, and did not put together that means I'd have plays that, of course, family would come to. So, guess who shows up for your plays when you're an adopted person in a family? Your family shows up. So eventually I had to start going through that piece again of talking to people and sharing my story, and got the opportunity to actually share my story to child welfare professionals for the first time, and got asked. And I thought, no way, I absolutely don't want to tell my story to anyone. I hate this so much. And I was in college, and someone was like, well, we'll pay you $500 to tell your story. I was like, well, I have always wanted to share my story and talk to people about what's been going on in my life. So sure, yeah, I'll do that. And I thought it'll be fine. I can get up there, I'll give a quick little speech and collect my money and use it for, of course, school activities and nothing else. And then I'll be on my way. And the day came, and I stood up and I saw all these people standing out there, and I started talking. And what I realized as I started talking is, like, everything, at the time I was 18 when I first shared my story, everything that I had suppressed for 8 years just kind of out of my mouth. Everything I felt, all the hurt, all of the things I was scared of, the way I wish the system had been, the hurt that I had for my birth mom, and that being torn still at 18 of, I can't hate her and I want to because everyone tells me I should. And anytime I talk about her, I have to feel guilty because everyone says how awful she is, and I can't feel the way that they feel, even though we were hurt so badly. And so going through all of those pieces, at the end of it, I was like, wow, I feel like I just lost a lot of weight. And then having people come up to me and say, thank you for sharing. I want to do something different because you shared your story. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to be a different worker. I'm going to be a different parent. I'm going to be a different whatever. And that was very nice. And I was like, okay, well, that's not so terrible. And then fast forward, and now it's my entire career of going around and talking, sharing my story, and working with people on their own story. I completely changed my major, ended up getting my undergrad in social psychology, just finished my graduate, and social work and got my license to do therapy, things that, again, I was like, I don't like people enough to be listening to their problems all day. But I've always had people come up to me and then talk to me and then feel better. And I felt better when they felt better. And I realized that I could do therapy my way and not the way that I had gotten it portrayed in my head. And so I was like, I could do this. So I ended up working for my adoptive mom for a lot of my early career. She opened a nonprofit organization for foster and adoptive parents that then grew so much over the last 20 years. And so I got to grow a lot of my experience there. And then recently made the decision to be my own boss. I'm going to go out there, and I love building programs. I got to do that and I got to manage them, but I really love even more being able to work with organizations and agencies across the world, not just be in Kansas City or Kansas, but to really affect change on a worldwide stance, not having a model, but being able to have other people have a model so that hundreds of thousands and millions of children can be affected positively. And so that's me. And I know I said I was going to condense that, and I really tried to get 32 years in there really quickly. But it all is so important for me because now when I have these kind of conversations and when I do the work I do as a consultant and when I work with children as a therapist on their stories, I'm reminded of all the pieces that brought me here. And everyone, usually when they hear the story and hear the end, they're like, oh, it's such a happy story. You ended up in a happy place. Like, it's obviously sucked in the beginning, but you ended up in a happy place. You're doing so well. I'm sure you're all right now. And the piece that is so important for me to tell people is that I still struggle with a lot of things. And I think that that's always going to be part of me. And I'm okay with it. I don't want it to be a detriment to my life. And of course, I have to be very cognizant of the relationships that are important to me. But there is no fixed, healed, done. And I think that that's an important piece for people, especially people who are interested in like being foster and adoptive parents, because they're like, when do I get to the part where you're over this? When do I get to the part where you're like every other child and I've loved you forever and we're good and we can just move forward? And that doesn't happen for some of us. And I think that when we start being okay with that and it looking different, it's not that it's not there at all. It just looks different. My relationship with my adoptive parents is different than they would want, honestly. Different than I want, but it's what I can do. And so having to learn that that's what I can do at this point in time in my life, and I'll continue working where I can, and where I can't, it's going to have to be. And then figuring out that piece. So that's a really important part that I really want to get out to a lot of people. And I hope that's what the part that I really want to be a therapist for young people for, is helping them understand that they are okay. There are things that are destructive, of course, and we're going to have to talk about those. And we don't want them to be in a place where they're constantly hurting, but also recognizing that it is okay to be different. It is okay to have reactions from what you've experienced. You have adapted because of what you've experienced. And once we start working through that, and a key phrase for me is it serving you, and is it serving you well? And if that's the case, if it's serving you, then we need to figure out how. And is what's serving you now beneficial to what you want in the future? And so it's those types of conversations, instead of let's fix you, that I think are super important for our system in order to really affect like those changes long term for people like me in this system. So that's everything.
Thank you, Nathan. And I must say, I want to take a deep breath. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. And I first of all want to say how sorry I am at the loss of your two brothers. And I think all of us can say this evening that we're just honored to have you here.
Thank
and for you to share your heart. And I know how difficult this has been for you, but at the same time, how proud we all are of you. And I have to ask, was it that moment when you were 18 years old, when this whole thing, you just realized that you wanted to be no longer a victim, that you had something to share and you could affect change? Was that the pivotal moment?
Probably. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when it happened. I remember my first speaking thing, and then at some point I ended up at 18 deciding I wanted to write a book. I wanted to tell my story, mostly because I was forgetting things, and I knew that I was forgetting things, and it still took me a long time to get it done. And so it was sometime in there, and then when I approached my adoptive mom and said, hey, I want to work for you, sometime in that window, I was like, I want to be proactive. Like, it's not even that I just want to be okay for myself, but I want to make sure that the world changes for other people. Yeah.
Well, I would like to start opening up for questions, because I know that there's going to be quite a few here. And who would like to ask the first question for Nathan or make a comment?
Thank you.
Anyone?
Linda has her hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Linda.
Hey. Nathan, thank you for sharing.
Of course.
So I'm new to learning about foster care. And it's in a group that I'm in. I'm a first mother in reunion with my son who was adopted as a baby. And there's a lot of former foster youth that are in this group. So I hear about that a lot. And one thing that is brought up a lot is situations like if your mom, your mother, your first mother would have received help, all those visits, if there were resources for her and help for her, how do you feel about that thought?
I 100% believe our lives would have been different. Absolutely. And so one of the not backstory, like present day, when I got married 4 years ago, it's gonna be 4 years ago next week, I decided it was time to go see my birth mom. When I was a kid, I wanted to reunify with her even after everything that had happened. I didn't want another family. That was my mom. And I wanted to break her out of jail. I thought about going to law school so that I could become some kind of crazy lawyer that could finagle the system to get her out. And so I just had all these crazy things at the time. And so my adoptive parents, one of the best things they did was say, like, be a child now. And when you're 18, if you still want to go see her, go and see her. So 18 came and I couldn't do it. And so 4 years ago, I was like, I need to do it. She has 7 life sentences in prison, so she's never getting out. And so that was hard. And so I hadn't seen her since I was 10 years old, the day I saw my brother die. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I had a great support system of people I worked with who really encouraged me as well, alumni of care. So anyway, I went and talked to her, and it was a lot of emotions. But one of the things we started talking about is all the things that had happened in our lives. And she had mentioned on several occasions, she went and actually sought services and support. And she actually tried to give us up on 2 occasions. She tried to give us up because she was like, I can't handle them. They're stressing me out. And 2 workers told her she just needed a break. So go send them to your grandparents for a little while, take a break, you'll be fine. She's like, I can't, I feel like I'm going to hurt them. They're stressing me out. I can't do this. And so then one of the workers gave her like a parent aid time. So they would come in and try to handle us, and they got stressed out. And of course they could just quit. So they moved on. So yes, I absolutely believe that if she had received help any of the times that she'd asked or any of the times that people came in, our lives would have been a lot different.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Tina Brown is asking a question. Nathan, she says, how did you reveal yourself to your wife as you were dating and getting to know her? Was it difficult to trust and be vulnerable in your relationship? That's a good question.
It's a really good question. So I'm going to overshare, not in an inappropriate way, but I'm going to overshare. So my wife, we met each other in college. So we've known each other since we were 18, and we were best friends in college. So I told her pretty much right away. And I'm not quite sure why, but I did. And of course, my wife, the great thing about her is that she's very emotional. She's had a very healthy life. And so like she is empathetic towards people and all of that stuff. So she felt a lot of it. And so it was like, well, what are you crying for? Because at that point, I'd been suppressing so much. So she's known the entire time, way before we started dating. But this is marriage number 2. And the reason I say that is because it is important. So we all went to college together. Even my first wife, the 3 of us all went to college together. And at the time, I was so focused on my own trauma and being me that I did not think that other people could come to a relationship with baggage. And you have to also be able to figure that out before, just jumping into something. And of course, I was 19 when I got with my first wife, and then we got married. And so all of that stuff happened. But my wife, the actual wife, was, in my life throughout that whole time. And so she's known all of that stuff. And the reason why she is so great, one of the many reasons, is that she can put up with the crazy that is me, but also challenge me in a way that's like, hey, you don't get to just be crazy. Like, yeah, up to this point, but then you got to actually be somebody. I think it's because we've grown up together. Like all my adulthood, I've known her. Like she's been there for all of that. And so she's been able to see those pieces. And because we were friends first, like she also got to see like the crazy, not trying to win her over side and be able to have those kind of confrontations. So it made it easier, but it allowed me to really check, like, what is it that I have to own in my inability to form relationships, and how do I do that differently if I want my current one to work and be sustainable. And so we've been together for 7 years, which is much longer than the first one, I'll tell you. Much longer. And it's truly, I had to do a lot of work, but I also have a great support system.
Great. Thank you for the question, Tina.
Yep.
Okay, Rosie's next. She has a question regarding transracial adoption. Rosie, you want to take yourself off of mute, please?
Done. Thank you, Marcie. And thank you, Nathan. It's just, it's a privilege to be able to hear your talk. My question, I'm wondering, does your book go into more depth around the transracial adoption? I gave up a daughter in 1971 who's biracial. Mm-hmm. We were in reunion for 25 years and we're currently estranged. She's just gotten increasingly angry with me for, first of all, giving her up for adoption, but mostly because of her her racial identity issues. That she's 50 years old now, so it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing for her. Mm-hmm. And of course, she was raised in a white family with 7 siblings who were all, natural children of her parents. So do you talk more about your experience in a transracial adoption in your book?
Not in the way that I would talk about it if I was writing it today. And so I talk a little bit about identity, a little bit about connecting with my parents, but it's much more dull than I would talk about it today. And really a big reason is, so I started writing it at 18, 19 years old. And my view of the world when I was 19 is different than my view of the world, of course, at 32, having a lot more experiences and realizing that how underprepared I was for being Black in art in America, truthfully. And so there's just been a lot that I've had to learn about myself and a lot that I've had to learn about the world that I wish I had known, that if I were writing it today, it would look different.
Well, I would like you to write another book about it. Thank you. I'm trying to get as much information on that topic. I don't know if it's going to heal our relationship, but I feel, I was very ignorant as a 17-year-old girl. I feel like I want to know more. But thank you.
I'd be happy to, of course, talk to you about it. Of course, from my perspective, but I'd for sure be happy to talk to you about it from what I've learned. And honestly, the nice thing is, in working in this field, I've been able to meet and grow friendships with a lot of transracially adopted people. And there are some pretty universal experiences, even across countries, that I think is helpful for people to know.
I will tap into that opportunity.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. Morgan says she made a comment and says she is deeply moved by you and your story, Nathan,
Thank you.
and appreciative of you being here tonight and sharing yourself and your story with all of us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be.
I've got another question for you while we're waiting for others. You want to talk a little bit about the Foster Children's Bill of Rights and how you were a part of that and what that looks like?
Yeah, so one of the first things I was able to do when I started working at what's now referred to as Foster Adopt Connect is help young people craft their stories, and it was a youth advocacy team. So we were called Youth Speak Out. It had about 12 teenagers who came together who were at various stages of their identity and family. So some of them were on the road to aging out, unfortunately. Some had been adopted and some were still in foster care. It was one of the first questions I asked is, are you interested in sharing your story? And if so, how do you want to? So besides just talking to people and presenting the way that I do and have done, they also wanted to make some long-lasting changes to the system itself. So we did some research and had discovered that in some states, people had what they refer to as Bill of Rights for children in foster care. And so we started looking through what those were and seeing if Missouri had any, and it didn't. And so this group came together and identified several topics that they really wanted, that they were like, if this could be in some type of law that kids could say, this is part of our legal right as kids in foster care, that would be great. So over the next, I think it took us 4 years to work through that, because of course it's not like you can just present a law and say, hey, and then everyone's done. So we, had to do revisions. We had to meet with people across the state and get support. And we had to get, of course, legislators on board. And it was a really cool experience. It was cool for me, but what was the coolest was seeing 14 to 17-year-olds make such an impact on a system when they were so young. Of course, like I was, at that time, I was 23, I think, when I started that work. And so just seeing, like, when I was 14 to 17, I was doing everything I could to hide the fact that I was in foster care. And there are these young people here who are not only not hiding it, but are actively talking on a big stage about their experiences to shape the system. So it was super empowering. And then they got it passed. So it's almost like a little graduation present for them. I think their first year of college is when we got that passed for some of our older ones. Or maybe our youngest ones, they were their first years of college. So it was just really cool that they got to come to Jefferson City and watch the governor as he signed this into law, and they got to stand behind him and be a part of the pictures and all of that stuff. And so it was one of my best moments in doing this work, I think.
Okay, do we have another question?
Yes, it looks like Peter.
Unmute. G'day, Nathan. It's really good to hear from you and hear from your experience. Yes, briefly, I'm a late discovery adoptee, 4 years in. I'm also I'm clearly anti-adoption. I'm also a foster carer of many years. I'm not a perfect foster carer. I'm not a perfect parent. I don't think any of us are, and I don't think I ever will be. But I'm I'm critical of the system too, and you alerted to it. Yeah, I don't into smacking kids, and I can't in foster care. But what you're alerting to is what I see is, when you set down rules in foster care to make the family work, you don't get the support from the foster care system to enforce those rules. Yeah, you're a parent without parenting rights to a large extent, and it's a hard road to navigate. So there's been a push here to. We're nowhere near the adoption in America. There's about 300 adoptions in Australia a year, compared to what you have over there, which I think 140,000 plus or something. Big disparity. So there's a push here, and we were sort of offered to adopt. I have a child, a young adult here, been with us for 10 years, and I flatly no, it's not going to happen. They didn't want it. We didn't want it. But there is something here that I don't know if you have over there. Is we noticed from 18 that there's a lot of children going from foster care that fell through the cracks and end up homeless because there's nothing from 18. In the state I'm in, and this affects two of the children who are in my care. One is actually a Kenyan refugee, and they're coming up to that period, and the government will support them for 5 years and will subsidise a rental accommodation for them, get them a rental history, and help them transition. but they have to nominate for that before they turn 18. If they don't get it.
Oh.
So it's a double-edged sword. In one way, it's sort of throwing them out, saying you've got to get out, which could be a good thing for them to make them stand on their own 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I think so long as we say, there's a safety net here. If it doesn't work out, you can come back. And that's not going to happen with all foster care families. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there that you might not be aware of the services we have here.
We have transition services. And one of the programs, the last program that I developed before leaving Foster Adopt was a transition-ish service for 17 to 26-year-olds. Not to that extent. Like our state, you can stay in our foster care system in Missouri until you're 21. It's not like super linear and everyone stays in. And so like, it's a little hard, but you can. And then there's some aftercare services that you can get. I think from some services it's up to like 24. And you get like college stuff, and you get health insurance until you're 26. So there's like, that's our state piece. And then we have programs in our area that serve kids in the other capacity. One of them is one that I created that helps with like all the other pieces of transition, including reconnecting to supports. But it's not the housing piece, which would be the best part of it, because that's the part that often gets our young people, is they end up homeless or they end up couch surfing because it's so hard to maintain housing, and then they don't get a rental history. So I like that. I'd be interested to learn more about how that was able to come about.
Yeah, you you to contact me, I can send you some information on that. I'm pretty easy to find by my name. Okay. I'm all over the internet.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, I believe Marcie Purcell, you have your hand up next.
Yeah, the part of your story that really resonated with me was that you landed in a large adoptive family, and I'm a foster care alum and an adoptee as well, and I also landed in a large adoptive family, and my experience was it was very chaotic with so many kids from many different places with many different levels of need. That it was challenging to get the kind of emotional support and just honestly supervision that was required. And so I'm just wondering if you felt like that was the case for you. Do you feel like you got, because there were so many kids, I don't know, it seems to me like that's a problematic environment when there's so many kids with so many high levels of need.
Yeah, it can definitely be challenging. Yes, I had the same experience. And I've noticed so in my family, there are 28 of us. 23 of us are adopted. So, and we span across, my youngest sister is 8. And my oldest sister is in her 40s. So there are a lot of us, a lot of different age ranges. I grew up in kind of that upper core group of people, but of course lived with the youngers who were coming in. And so it was absolutely chaotic. And there wasn't a whole lot of that emotional support. And at the time, I honestly didn't care, because I was going through my teenage years. And so like there's that natural development piece of wanting to detach. And my parents were both very much like, they're growing their businesses and they were there, that, they would come to things, but it didn't feel it. I don't have the same stories as like my wife does when she talks about kind of her years with her family. And so that part's a little like, but I also have siblings who have grown up in this family who have a completely different experience. And so their temperament was one that kind of was able to find their groove in there and get that support that they needed. I am a person just in general, it's part of who I am, that if you don't come at me with emotional support, I will never approach you with it, because I don't want to be rejected. So I just didn't seek it out, and my parents weren't oozing it, to be honest. Like they weren't oozing with it. And so we all kind of just did our thing. And then I became an adult and my relationship got better, but from that adult, like, hey, how you doing? We're good. Okay. Type of mentality. So yeah, it can absolutely be hard. You kind of have to have the right temperament for a big family, I think. and I'm a small family person. Again, it's hard for me to be around a lot of people. Genuinely, I do good with work and sharing my story, but like that emotional bonding piece, I'm a small group type of person. Like two people in my family would be great.
Well, thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
Okay, Leslie, are you available to take yourself off of mute? You made a nice comment. I thought you might want to also add something to that.
Yes, I'm coming in. I was busy eating my pizza and I didn't want to detract. I think, Nathan, what you do with your life is incredible. And you live it. And anyway, I just am in awe of that. And I'm very glad to support him and think so much of what you say makes so much sense. So keep saying it.
Thank you. I'm a fan of yours as well, Miss Leslie. Appreciate you. Leslie also, by the way, was one of the people who helped me get into grad school and is helping me as I figure out this life. So a lot of praise to her and encouraged me. When we met, she was like, you need to go back to school. And I was like, back to school. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I know a star when I see one.
I saw some comments about families. Oh yeah, Kelly said that she was shocked that my parents were able to adopt so many kids. Yeah, providing emotional support for that many people is challenging. Yeah, and I mean, it's just like any other family. People have different relationships with my parents, and there are some who have a lot more of an emotional bond than others. And it's the same with us as siblings. There are some of us that have a better relationship with each other than others. I truthfully tend to be kind of on the outer ring of our family. In all honesty, I like not drama and kind of being to myself. And of course, I have my lovely wife and I've created my own supports and everything like that. So I love my family and I'm glad that I have a family, but I'm not as enmeshed with them as some of my other siblings.
Okay, I'm going to hop in here and ask a quick question. Another one, Nathan, if you don't mind. And it's regarding your book, Morning After the Storm. I believe Beth put the link, the Amazon link, of those of you that are interested in Nathan's book. Tell us about this cover.
Yep.
The cover design and how you came to that.
So the name Morning After the Storm came to me. I couldn't sleep one night, which is one of my long-term effects of trauma. I don't sleep. I have never been able to sleep through the night. Like I just don't. But anyway, it came to me that name, which then of course made me work on the double meaning of morning. And then the faucet is because that is the most tragic thing that happened is when my brothers were burned in the bathtub. And so one of the pieces that I didn't go into too much detail here, but is in the book, is that my mom actually had me draw the bath water and I was in there when she pushed them in. So I've had a lot of guilt for myself because I participated. I felt like if I had said no, or if I had done anything, and I like tried to put cold water in it because I thought I was drawing a bath for her. And so I saw how hot it was and tried to make it cold and got in trouble for it. And so like there's all of those pieces. So that moment was absolutely what changed the trajectory of my life, is when that bath water was drawn. And so that's why I picked that as the cover.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, it looks like someone.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Nathan, this is I'm so deeply moved by your story, by your lived experience, and by the wisdom that you imparted to us. There are so many gems in what you said that I will probably go back over this recording again and again, just to make sure that I get those and ingrained in myself, because you really spoke some things. So with that said, I wanted to ask you a question that, as a young person growing up in a foster care environment that you were growing up in, and you had to say and speak to the adults that could possibly be in that child, in a child's life, what are the most important things that you want adults to know about when they're having to be in relationship with a foster youth?
What is the most important thing? It's going to sound simple, but it really is about showing up. I think what I've learned over the years of doing this work and talking to hundreds and hundreds of young people is that they don't have people who consistently show up, and like to their life. Like, you show up as if you're ready to be a part of their life, and that's when it's hard. There's no conflict resolution. Is a really hard thing in child welfare. What I've learned is that we don't actually set our young people up for understanding that relationships aren't just about give and take. When we get mad, we leave, or the kid moves, or a worker changes. These people don't show up like they're ready to be a part of someone's life and be in there for the hard part. And then we expect us to just somehow magically through the world learn how to do that, and without any modeling. So I think that if you're going to be in this field, especially a field that this isn't the millionaire club, you have to at least come into it knowing that even if you're not going to adopt every kid that you come in, and you're not going to bond with every kid, you're going to show up for every kid, and you're going to make sure that you've put a lot of other people who can show up for that person, so that when they're at their worst day, they know that it's okay to have your worst day, and you're going to have a knockout, drag out fight with somebody, but you're also going to be able to laugh about it and be like, hey, remember that time you were crazy and I almost knocked you out? And then, we had coffee or whatever. Like that is what people get to share when they have families. That is the thing that people get to talk about when they have friends. And when we have kids in foster care, they have the first part of the story. Remember when you want to knock them out and then I moved, or then my worker quit, or then I was told I had to get on medication, or then I went to residential treatment. Like the story always has an abrupt and tragic ending, and no one is showing up to get past that part for them. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. I definitely will keep that under advisement myself. Thank you so much.
I saw there's another one. No.
Tina wants to ask,
Okay.
Yes, it says, if his experiences affected him because, becoming a parent himself, has the idea of being a parent been challenging or concerning, because as adoptees, we may question our own qualifications of being a good parent? That's a good question.
A fantastic question. So in my book, which is actually, it's just so funny how life changes. So in my book, I talk about how I want to be a parent and I can't wait to have children. And I was super excited about it. And I'm actually at the point in my life where I don't want kids at all. So at first I didn't want kids because I was terrified. Like, I should not be a parent. I am too messed up. I'm too crazy. Both of my birth parents have extreme mental health issues. Like, my biological dad was extremely abusive to my biological mom. And all of those genetics are in me. I mean, that was where my head is. And to some extent, I still am, I have that mindset. There are lots of things like my quickness to anger that I know I get from both of my parents, and my inability to calm myself down without separating. But then I was able to get around a lot of supports who were like, hey, you can do it. These are all the things that would make you a great parent. So I was like, okay, I could do it. And then I went through kind of a realization moment of why did I want to be a parent? And I realized it wasn't because I wanted kids. It was because I was trying to fix something. I was trying to prove something. And so I didn't want kids because I thought I was broken. And then I wanted kids because I wanted to prove that I wasn't broken. And neither of those things were good. And so I was like, so now when my wife and I started talking about it, we were like, okay, we love being able to have our life, and we go on trips and we have friends, and like, okay, so why do we want kids? And we sat there for a really long time and we couldn't think, neither of us have that instinct to just care for something we don't have pets. Like, we are not those people. We are like I go home, I want to be lazy and watch TV and eat, and that's it. And so we're like, okay, cool. So that's where we are now. We're the no kid camp. We love it. And we always know that if there's a big system, I'm trying to cuss as much. I have to really watch myself on that. We know there's a big system of kids. If we ever decide that we do want them, that we can snatch them up. So that's kind of it. But it's not on the I feel broken camp anymore. It's really the I'm too lazy to care for another human being camp. That's where I am.
Okay.
I saw that Keith had a question
Yeah,
as well.
that's what I was just getting ready to say, Keith.
Oh, Nathan, yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story. And I really am very impressed by your resiliency, your strength, and
Thank you.
yeah, from like just the fact, like you said, you've been sharing your story openly since you were like 18, and you're still doing it, and you went to the mental health field to make things better, and that's really great. And yeah, thanks for because from what you're saying, it's like you might be a little different in other situations, but you're comfortable like sharing your story, and because it's having an impact. So I appreciate that. And yeah, it's all we connected on Facebook a few months ago out of nowhere, and we don't, but
Yes.
just hello, and yeah, I appreciate it. I'm inspired by everybody I connect with in the adoption community. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. And I one of the reasons I like telling my story is because I really like telling people, not telling people that I'm broken, but like telling people that there is still stuff that I deal with. I think that's such an important part to help people feel normal. I feel normal, but I also recognize that I have my crap. Like there are things that I'm going to constantly have to deal with because I can't stop thinking about the things that happened in my life that led up to here. Like, it's in the field, it's what I do. So I think that that's important for people to know. It really motivates me.
Okay, another question from me.
Okay.
Founder of Resilience Recognized. Tell us about that.
Yes, there's not a whole lot to tell right now because I literally just did it. And so one of the things for people to know about Nathan Ross, if you're going to have a long-term connection to me, is that I'm kind of impulsive. And so I'm a planned impulse person. So I will impulsively think of something, but then I have to have a plan for how to do it in order to actually follow through with it. So it's kind of that's where I am. So a couple of months ago, let's see, in March, I had some things happen that I was not in favor of in my life, and was like, I've always kind of wanted to just do my own thing and lead my own life. And why wait an additional decade when I can start doing that now? I was finishing up my degree. So I reached out to people that I was connected to, one of those being the lovely Miss Leslie, and talked to them and got their counsel and, helped strategize. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready to venture out on my own. So it's really been we're going into month 3 of me like being out on my own, trying to figure out what Resilience Recognized in entirety will be. I know in general, it's going to be on 2 camps. One is therapy. I've really loved doing it. So I had to do a practicum for my graduate degree. And in that, I got to start doing some therapy in a practice setting with kids. And I really liked being able to talk with kids and help them work through their stories. But I also like being able to talk to parents about, okay, yes, I get that you think that, and you're right, because this is it. Ultimately, this is your house and this is your family, and the kid is going to be part of this family. So I'm not going to tell you to fix yourself. This is a perspective, though. So when I was at this age, this is what I was thinking. And so that has been really nice. And the other piece of Resilience Recognized is program development and policy development for agencies and states. So I've had a lot of experience developing program. I love doing it. I get really energized about helping people solve problems. I don't want to manage programs anymore, though. So I've done that part. Like I like to come up with a vision and get someone help execute it, and then I want to be done. I don't get any like drive out of just managing. So those are the 2 things I'm like the 2 camps, and I'm actually getting to do both of those right now. So I'm working with a group in Canada on some policy development for Ontario's government. They're wanting to reform their child welfare system. So I'm getting to work with them. Then I'm getting to start my therapy practice I think I saw someone ask a question about what my degree was in. And so I got my master's in social work, and I got my provisional social work license so that I could do therapy. Yeah. Yep. So I just graduated like 3 weeks ago. And I'm so glad, because I was in school for frickin' ever. I've spent most of my adulthood in school because I didn't do school the right way. I went to college for 3 years, left because I was going to become an actor. So I got an agent and did all this crazy stuff, and then had to go back and finish that degree, and then went to graduate school. So I'm like, I'm never going back. I'm never going back. And then I hear people have PhDs, and the competitive side of me wants to go back just so I have that. And I have to remind myself, like, do you need it? Is it worth it? So that's where I am. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be done.
Okay, do we have another question? We've got a few more minutes.
I love the questions part. It's my favorite part of speaking. I always want to know, like, what people are going to ask. The craziest thing I'm going to get asked.
Linda, you have another question?
I don't want to talk if someone else has a question, though. Oh, it looks like somebody else does, since I've already asked one. If there's time, you can go back to me.
I think her hand has just stayed up.
Oh.
Since the first question is Marcie. Oh, someone asked if I am close with my bio sister and brother now. I almost always get that question, so I'm glad I got asked that. I am close with my bio sister. I am not close with my brother. So we have never been. Honestly, truthfully, if we were walking on the street and I didn't know that he was my brother, we would pass each other by and go on. So we just don't have that relationship. He moved to Minnesota probably 12 years ago. And doesn't come back very regularly. And when he comes back, I haven't seen him in easily 10 years, I think. So we talk every once in a while on Facebook sometimes, and he'll let me know what's going on in his life. And he asks questions about, like parenthood, like what's the last question so he'll randomly pop up. My biological sister, we were disconnected for a long time. So she was adopted with me and completely disconnected from the family. She did not like being adopted by our family. And so when she was 19, she left our family and just completely disengaged. And then she stayed a little bit connected to me throughout the years and then didn't anymore. And so it was 2 years ago that she reached out to me, and we've been reconnected since. Now we live in the same city. I talk to her regularly, just talked to her yesterday. She has 3 kids. And so we get to stay connected, which has been really nice. There is just a difference. I've noticed for myself, there is a difference with like my biological siblings than with my adopted siblings. I think the big part is that there's just like this light that people give when they talk about their family, and they get to talk about all the time they spent with them that you kind of miss when you go through foster care and are adopted without your siblings. And so like, there's always that piece of, you have a kind of like cuts in your storyline that you don't necessarily get to share. And so it's nice to have someone that I have that full story with, to be able to share those same things like I see with my friends as they talk about their siblings and stuff. So that's been nice. But neither of them are connected to my birth mom, in case anyone also wanted to know that piece. Neither of them want anything to do with them at this point, which is of course okay. We all kind of have different perspectives, and we don't actually talk about our past with each other.
Okay, David P says or asks, you still have a relationship with your foster parents whom your brother stayed with?
Absolutely. I love Jack and Kaylee, and will forever just be so grateful for them. I had foster care done right. My foster parents stayed in my life my entire life. They became my grandparents. They truthfully were the reason I got to go to college in the first place, because I wasn't going to be able to go at first, and then they helped pay for it. And they have been there. And so when I got married, my actual marriage, that's what I consider this one, I got married at the farm that I grew up at, which was with them. So I got to get married on their lawn under the tree that I played on at. And so they are my family, and I'm can't say enough great things about them. And I'm so glad that I got to have people who stayed connected to me, because it just has been so empowering and impactful for me.
Okay, anyone else?
Oh, I saw a question. Thank
Bruce,
you.
yes. Bruce, you want to take yourself off mute?
Sure. Thanks, Nathan. This was fantastic, and I really appreciate you. You present yourself with a lot of strength, and I just really appreciate you. Just telling us all about the craziness too,
Yeah.
because it makes it real. And I can't imagine how we can survive these events without, being crazy on some level. It's just how it manifests. And for some of us, it spills out, I think, in more dysfunctional ways than others. But my question had to do with your siblings and how they fared with the trauma. You guys all experienced sort of the same event or probably multiple events of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma is not what happens outside of us, but what happens inside of us. And you guys were different ages. And I'm just curious. You were just mentioning that, you haven't been in touch with them, so you may not be able to answer the question. But I'm just curious how it manifested for them, if you know.
Yeah, and that is hard because we don't ever talk about it. And so one of the things that's like, it's not good. I'm gonna say it's good because it's just like we're truly siblings. Is we are all very stubborn, and like you can just see that in us when we have any type of conflict or anything like that. But we also this quickness to detach from things that are too hard or too emotionally require too much emotional investment is also shared between all three of us. And so that is one thing. Those are the two things that I have noticed between all of us, but the details of how they've dealt with it, I don't know because we don't talk about it. I speak out and, use my story and share my story, but they don't mind that I do it. They don't want to do it at all. And they don't want anyone approaching them about it or talking to them about it. So it seems like they are more in the camp where I was prior to college. And they've kind of stayed there and are okay with that. And my sister has talked to her children about her upbringing. And I know that because my nephews have talked to me about it like a little bit. So she's given them a little bit of information. So she wants them to know why, obviously you can't go see birth grandma and why your grandma, Lori, looks different. But that's it. And then my brother, he has literally never said one thing about anything that's happened to us ever. So I truly don't know for him.
Yeah, I also appreciate you, being honest about where you are with parenthood too. And
Yeah.
because I went into parenthood thinking I really had my act together, and that's great theoretically, and until you actually are presented with, the emotions of these little packages. And it was really good for a period of time, and then I started realizing that my kids were outgrowing me, even though they were like 7 or 8. But developmentally, I still had these broken pieces in me that I had that were exiled, and so it has gone back and forth between me thinking I know what I'm doing, and then being educated by them that I have no clue. And have a bunch of work to do internally before I can show up for them, because they ultimately want wholeness, and if I'm not whole, I can't provide that to them, and then I've got to do my own work to get whole, so I can be there for them. Anyway, Nathan, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That resonates with me, and that's with a lot of people. I think one of the things that's kind of like it sometimes can feel like a blinding light. There's like when you see people who are like, wow, you had a functional family life and no significant trauma, and like just hearing and seeing that radiance can be sometimes a little overwhelming. And honestly, I get a little jealous by it. But it also makes me want to work towards how to get that for myself and get to a place where I can have that as much as I can, recognizing that there's also parts of me that's super quick again to like detach from things, because that's the survival piece that I won't ever. I don't know that even if someone gave me the choice, I don't know that I would ever choose to get rid of it, because I think it would help make me forget why I developed it in the first place. And I don't know that I want to give that up. But it is just, so it's like having to work through that piece and integrate it into some kind of stability. It is a journey.
It is, yeah.
I know, sorry, we're probably out of time. I did see one that, did I find out why my foster parents didn't keep me? That's what I wanted to answer that, because I absolutely did. We were bad. I'm like, we hellion children, like just awful. I can't even try to pretend like we weren't and that they were just crazy. We put them through it. Again, they were 60. I was 10, my sister 12, my brother 8. So we hadn't even hit teenage puberty years, and we were just the worst. We really were. And so like they were like, they need a younger family. They need a younger family who's going to help deal with all the stuff that they still have to figure out. And they didn't think that they could do that. My brother was so adamant about not going to the Ross house, and they were so worried about having him do another move that was not only separate from us, but not even where he had been, that they're like, we're going to keep you here. And then they just adopted him. And so like, yeah, even now there's a part of me that's like, that sucked, like that stings. I wish I could have stayed with them. But the conscious, rational me is like, that's also the best thing that probably could have happened. I needed to go to the Ross house, mostly because my adoptive parents are so much different than my foster parents in their approach to like being. They're not the lovey-dovey, everything's gonna be okay, we can kumbaya and get through it. They're the, hey, this is the world, so like, yeah, we can talk about it later, but let's move forward. And I actually needed that in order to get to a place where I could be rational and be like, yes, there's a time for emotions, but there's also accountability. So I'm super thankful that I got to go to my adoptive home. My brother, I don't know that he would have done as well. Honestly, I don't think my sister should have been adopted there. So their reason absolutely makes sense to me. It's sad, but I also am so glad that it was able to be that way, and especially because they stayed a part of my life.
Okay, I know we're winding down on time, but Tina, I know you've got another question there. I'm going to let you take that last one, and then I want to talk about his book, Nathan's book, pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering, telling your story is a way of honoring the brothers that you lost. And I'm wondering, is there any other way that's been helpful for you to honor their memory?
I'm gonna have to write that down. There are so few questions that shock me at this point, and this is the first time I've ever been asked that question, ever, in 14 years. No one's ever asked me that. So I don't even know, like I usually have an answer prepared because I've been asked so many things so many times. That's a good one. Well,
and you don't have to answer it.
Oh no, I don't mind answering it.
Okay.
I just never thought about it. You know, honestly, it's still hard to think about my brothers. There's not a day that usually goes by that I don't think about the things that happen in our lives. And so, you know, and people have also always suggested therapy and things like that. And that's where there's that broken part of me that I'm just in this space where I don't want that. So it's kind of hard. And so this is the avenue, and then I detach from it, is really what happens. And so like everything I do outside of my field is all about comedy, happy, uplifting. I don't I don't watch dramas. I can't watch anything where main characters die. I don't deal with sadness. I don't watch the news. Truthfully, I know it sounds awful, especially as a 32-year-old, but I just get so much in this field that's already reminds me of how sad the world is, that I can't do it. And so like, I know that doesn't really answer your question, but this is like the biggest thing for me at this point in time. But now that you have posed that question, I am going to think on it because I want to know if there is something that I would do. Like going to their graves, I don't do. To be honest, I've gone, well, twice, but once purposefully in the last 6 years. And I actually only went because my birth mom, once I reconnected to her, she obviously never, well, obviously to you all, she never got to go to their funeral. She was told she was going to, but they thought it was going to be too big of a risk. so they didn't allow her to. So she never got to say goodbye. So I went to their graves and put my phone there and allowed her to have her time to grieve, because she hadn't, and just be there. But they're like, seeing that, I can't, I truly, like, it's just hard. Those pieces are.
So I guess the only thing I would add that I could maybe challenge you is that I've volunteered for years with kids that had significant loss, and it's under a children's bereavement art group.
Oh.
And so I guess what I'm hearing from you is that the loss is defined by the tragedy, and there was all the things as siblings that brought you joy in just having the siblings. So one day that the memory will be about their life and not about when it ended for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I really like that bereavement.
Yeah. So it's giving the children tools through art for words that we don't have, right? We don't have them as adults. So this helps them express it.
And that goes in line. So one of the things that I specifically like doing is narrative, the narrative part of narrative therapy, mostly the narrative part, because I've told my story. And so when I've been able to work with people, young people, on talking about their stories, and some of those activities include like crafting goodbye messages that they want to people they didn't get to say goodbye to.
Yes, we do that too.
Super impactful for me.
We do a letter.
Oh, yeah, that's what I did. Yeah.
The kids write a letter of something that they want to let it could be their parent or a grandparent, whoever's been raising them. And that's part of that is what would you like them to know right now today about you? Yeah. So you could do that too.
Yeah, I do like that. I'm for sure going to reflect on that one. Thank you for that. I like the shocking ones. I'm like, oh, I haven't had that one before. They're rare. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, Nathan, if it's all right with you.
Of course.
I would like to, can I read just a little piece of your book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would just like to read a little section here because I think this needs to be said, if you don't mind, before we close. Okay, from Nathan's book, it's called Morning After the Storm. We put the link out in the chat bar, and I think some of you have already mentioned that you've gone ahead and purchased it, but I want to read this. Whatever it is, do something. Everyone has something that they can do, some resource that they can provide that can help out a child in need. We all have something that we can give to a child to let them know that the storm is temporary and that the morning will come. I know we have our work cut out for us, but I also believe that if we work hard enough, there will be real and positive changes in the lives of children who would otherwise have no hope. So I thank you all, each person that has decided to step up and make a difference in their community. People like you who decided to care about the path of my life took, saved me, and I couldn't be more grateful. Many blessings, friends. I look forward to seeing the wonderful world that is shaped by the actions of champions. Beautiful. And I know there's a lot of champions out there. And we thank you, Nathan, so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just to let you know, Nathan is giving away an autographed copy of his book. And I believe Beth has pulled out our winner this evening, and it's Tina Brown. You get an autographed copy. Yay, wonderful. So you'll need to get your email address to, well, I have your email address, Tina. I have it. I'll give it to Nathan.
Okay.
And the two of you will coordinate and he'll get that book off to you, okay? Wonderful. Okay. Beth, do you have our closing slide for next week's guest? Okay, we have Miss
Oh,
April
yay!
Goody.
I love April.
Yes, we love April, and we're looking forward. Yeah, this is her first time on. She's been on our radar for quite some time and a very busy lady. So yeah, you want to definitely mark your calendars for next Friday and join us at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll meet April and find out what's going on in her world. Anything else you have, Beth? I think you have 2 more slides for us. Okay, this is a reminder that Dr. Joyce will continue to offer her Lost and Found Then What? It's an exploration of after reunion. It seems to be popular. So we'll be having her back. You want to mark your calendars for Joyce. And then David. And I'll show David's slide as well. And then we have David with Adoptee Paths to Recovery. David, are you still with us? He might have had to hop off. I know. Let me look here. Okay, I was just going to give him the opportunity to say something, but yes, and I know that you know, David meets bi-monthly, and this is for all adoptees and family members who are in recovery. So you're all welcome to join that as well. So listen, again, on behalf of NAAP, Nathan, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. You've, again, your story has just moved all of us. We wish you the best in your new career, and we know we're going to see you online and hopefully at a conference.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to
go to Indy.
Yeah, can't wait to get to
Come
conference.
out to Indy for conference. We'd love to have you, wouldn't we? Okay, everybody, make it a great week, and we will see you next Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Nathan, just stay with me for 1 second. Oh, he went ahead and hopped off. Okay. Okay. Beth, everything went fine.
Okay, good. Not too bad.
You did fine. I just need to make a note to remind myself to email Nathan Tina's email address.
That he's got quite the story, doesn't he?
He's got quite the story.
Goodness.
I had to read that part. I was so moved by that.
I'm glad you
People's
did. That was
faces,
really.
Now I'll have to watch the replay, but
That was really, really good.
yeah.
Really good.
But anyway, we did fine. And yeah, I could see him coming to Indy doing a workshop. He would be a great keynote as well.
Yes, yes.
So
He really,
we'll have to keep
really
and a prospective board member.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we need, you know, now that we've been talking more and more about foster care, look like we've got to build that out, you know.
Right.
I definitely see that he would be a fit for the board.
So
that's what I was catching, but
right. Yeah.
But anyway,
he really took a difficult, horrible situation and has turned it into something so meaningful to other people and helpful. It's really something.
All righty.
Okay.
I appreciate your help tonight.
Okay, sure.
And I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, all right. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.